After my father's funeral, our family got together to talk about the inheritance. My father had been a respected major shareholder in a company. During the meeting, my brother-in-law, Jason, suddenly spoke up. My wife, Emily, your eldest daughter, should get the stocks in a total of $5 million, he argued firmly. As my brother-in-law and sister seemed eager about getting a large sum of money, the lawyer, with a bit of surprise, explained, Emily doesn't legally have the right to the inheritance. My name is John. I'm a 42-year-old salary worker living with my wonderful wife and 2 children. My father was well known as a major shareholder in a company and was still working at 78. I have an older sister named Emily, who has always caused our parents a lot of worry with her repeated troublesome behavior. Even though she is middle-aged, she hasn't settled into a stable career and lives a selfish life. I've always felt uneasy and frustrated with my sister's actions, so I keep my distance. When Emily turned 50, she suddenly brought home a young man and announced, I'm getting married. The man, Alex, was much younger than my sister. While he was attractive, he seemed irresponsible, which didn't impress me. Emily boldly demanded money from our father for her wedding, which she quickly spent. She shamelessly asked for more money, causing our father more stress. It's my inheritance anyway, so what's wrong with using it now? She said defiantly. I watched my sister's behavior coldly. Not long after her marriage, our father suddenly fell ill while playing golf and passed away quietly a few days later. Losing him so suddenly was a deep sorrow for me. His unexpected death shocked his many friends, and the phone kept ringing nonstop. Telling myself there was no time for tears, I took charge of the funeral arrangements for my grieving mother. As usual, my sister left home and refused to help with the funeral. Exhausted after the funeral, my mother and I barely had time to rest when the lawyer came to our house the next day to discuss the inheritance. We already knew that our father had left a will. Unaware of this, my sister Emily and her husband Jason, who seemed overly confident, barged into the discussion and made a shocking statement. Jason, looking triumphant, said, the stocks and the $5 million inheritance will go to my wife, your eldest daughter, so don't think about using it as you please. He boasted confidently. My mother and I were bewildered by this absurd statement, at a loss for words. Jason, looking smug, exclaimed, all right, Emily, with this will be rich too. His excitement was barely containable. Far from mourning my father's death, my brother-in-law's jubilant demeanor shocked the lawyer. Emily, looking dissatisfied, questioned, what kind of reaction is that? The lawyer, facing them seriously, clarified, I'm sorry, Emily, but you have no legal right to the inheritance. This news left both my sister and brother-in-law stunned. Emily, visibly angry, raised her voice. That can't be true. Emily is the eldest daughter after all, Jason said, revealing his high hopes for the inheritance, a clear hint of greed in his eyes. Were you not aware Emily is not the biological daughter of the deceased? Upon hearing this, Emily's face changed dramatically, and she turned to our mother with a questioning gaze. Mom. At that moment, my mother looked conflicted, as if she couldn't find the right words to say. I had always known that Emily wasn't biologically related to our father, but it seemed she was completely unaware of this fact. Confused, Emily began to shake our mother's shoulders, pleading in a desperate voice, Mom, what does this mean? Unperturbed by the shaking, my mother calmly yet firmly replied, Emily, you are the daughter of my previous husband. As she quietly disclosed the significant fact, Emily, who had always tormented me by saying Dad loves me the most, now wore a face of utter disbelief. Suddenly, Jason interjected, but if there was an adoption, she would have rights to the inheritance. Right. That's correct, isn't it, Emily? He asked, seeking confirmation from my sister. Yes, that should be the case, Emily replied. However, in front of Emily, our mother slowly shook her head. No, Emily, we never went through an adoption, my mother stated quietly. At her words, both my sister and brother-in-law once again wore faces of shock. Emily, shaking with anger, cried out, "How could this be? I am the oldest daughter of this family, and Dad even said so." Emily yelled at me, filled with anger, her voice shaking. She continued, "Why do you get to control all of our family's money?" Her words made me furious, and I quickly shot back, "Have you ever thought about how much you made Dad spend? Do you still have something to say?" I said angrily, "Shut up. I'm the daughter of this house. I have every right to the money." "Spending money on a daughter is what parents are supposed to do," she insisted. I was shocked and let out a deep sigh. Normally, spending money on a daughter isn't wrong, but the problem was how much my sister made Dad spend on her debts and other expenses. Then the lawyer, who had been quietly watching, finally spoke up. "How about we let Emily see the will too?" "A will? What are you talking about?" "I don't know anything about a will," Emily responded, confused. Emily's ignorance about the will was her own fault. Dad wanted to discuss the will with the whole family and had asked everyone to be there when it was written, but she ignored this and went out to do other things. When I mentioned this, Jason couldn't hide his anger and glared at Emily. "Why did you do that, Emily? It was important." "So what will you all do?" At this question, my sister and brother-in-law looked at each other and agreed to hear the will. The lawyer then read aloud Dad's will, which clearly named my mother and me as the only inheritors of the entire estate. The will also explained why Emily was not legally adopted. It seemed Dad had originally wanted to accept Emily as a formal family member, but the will detailed his disappointment in her mean actions towards me in childhood and her increasing wastefulness as she grew older. No way. Emily was shocked and speechless. Faced with the reality of having no inheritance rights, she seemed unable to recover from the shock. "What does this mean, Emily? Were you deceiving me, making me believe we'd become rich?" Jason demanded. My mother and sister were stunned, but I wasn't surprised. Jason's dishonest behavior regarding money had always been obvious. He might have married Emily just for her money. "Emily, don't come back here until you have money." "Wait, Jason, don't be so cruel. I believed we'd be rich together." "I'm so disappointed in you," Emily pleaded. Jason roughly pushed past Emily and left the room. Left behind, Emily glared at us with a face full of anger. "Mom, why didn't you adopt me?" she demanded. My mother, struggling to find words, managed to say, "Well, that is why." "Why does Mom get the inheritance? I should have rights too. It's unfair because of Mom's lack of action. Don't you think it's terrible?" Emily cried. My mother quietly murmured, "Emily, it's unfair, too cruel." Emily's cries, with her hair disheveled, were intense enough to scare anyone, but the lawyer remained calm as if it were a normal day. "Why do you get everything? Why nothing for me?" Emily demanded. "Because I'm Dad's biological child," I said. As soon as I said that, Emily, in a fit of rage, reached out to hit me. "It would have been better if you never existed," she screamed. I thought that even if I hadn't been there, Dad would have made the same decision because of Emily's behavior. But before I could argue back, the lawyer quietly intervened. "Emily, please refrain from such actions. Otherwise, I will have to contact the police," he warned her gently. Emily, startled by the mention of the police, calmed down. With a history of minor crimes like shoplifting, she was sensitive to the mention of the authorities. My mother, holding back tears, tried to speak again, but Emily clicked her tongue in frustration and left the room. About 6 months later, the inheritance process was smoothly completed. Emily and Jason initially resisted strongly, but the lawyer's skillful handling left them little room to interfere. Eventually, my mother did give Emily a small amount of money, but it wasn't my place to comment on it. Frustratingly, Emily and Jason then disappeared without a trace. Their blatant greed left our relatives shocked and disappointed. One day, my wife suggested we take my mother and daughter out for a pleasant meal. Since losing Dad, my mother had been down, but spending time with her beloved granddaughter brightened her up. "Mom, why don't you come and live with us?" I proposed to my mother, but she hesitated. "Well, Emily might come by occasionally." "Emily only comes here to beg for money." "You shouldn't indulge her," I replied. My mother's hesitation was understandable. Despite her issues, Emily was her irreplaceable daughter. If we went to our family home, there was a chance Emily would cause trouble again. Understanding these concerns, I gave my mother some time to think as I drove her home. Surprisingly, there were lights on at the usually empty house. Thinking Emily might have returned, I parked the car cautiously in the garage. We got out of the car and started walking towards the entrance. Suddenly, a car rushed towards us. "Watch out!" My daughter, who was leading the way, yelled. Instinctively, I threw myself to protect my wife, barely avoiding the car. "Ouch!" I groaned in pain. Fortunately, the car only grazed me, but I was thrown against a flower bed. The car eventually crashed into the garage entrance and came to a stop. My wife, with a worried expression, asked, "Are you okay, Dad?" My mother trembled at the entrance, unable to speak due to surprise and concern. The situation was chaotic. I was rushed to the hospital by ambulance and ended up staying overnight. It turned out Jason was the one who caused the accident. He told the police he mistook the brake for the accelerator, but I wasn't convinced. During this time, Emily visited the hospital with my mother. While my mother was sending flowers, I looked at me and said, "You're surprisingly tough, aren't you?" She muttered, seemingly disappointed. I thought to myself, just as I suspected, and provocatively responded, "If I had died in the accident, Mom would have inherited everything." Disappointed at my words, Emily clearly looked uneasy. "I know what you were expecting," I continued as Emily averted her eyes, looking down. "But you see, Mom intends to renounce her inheritance, so your hopes won't come to fruition." As I said this, Emily stared back at me in astonishment. It seemed unbelievable to her that someone would willingly give up what they could receive. "I have a wife and kids, so Mom says the inheritance should go to them." "That's what a parent should do," I explained. "But that's—" Emily started to object, her words trailing off. "I've made a will, following Dad's example. Unfortunately, the inheritance that I should have will no longer go to Mom." At these words, Emily shivered, unable to hide her agitation. Unable to conceal her anger, Emily raised her voice. "Give me a share. It's $5 million, isn't it?" When I said no firmly, Emily got really angry and grabbed my shirt. "You should give me half at least. I'm your real sister," she shouted. She kept yelling loudly about wanting half of the money we inherited, but I felt sorry for her. Being so greedy would have disappointed Dad. "Can't you see that?" I said calmly to her. Emily's face turned red quickly, and she tried to grab my throat. Just then, our mom came back into the room and yelled, "Emily, what are you doing?" When she heard our mom, the nurses came in and took Emily away. Mom seemed to want to protect Emily, but Emily left, saying mean things to her. "What did I do wrong to raise her?" Mom said sadly. Not long after that, we found out that Mom had gotten sick. We felt sad seeing her get weaker, so we started helping out more with things like driving her places and doing chores. This seemed to make Emily even angrier. She might have found out from Mom or my wife when she asked for money. One day, Emily called me unexpectedly on my phone. "We'll take care of Mom from now on. You don't need to come anymore," she said. "What do you mean, all of a sudden?" I asked. "I've already decided," she replied. I was worried about leaving Mom in Emily's care because Emily struggled with basic household tasks, let alone caring for someone who was sick. I quickly called Mom to understand what was going on. Surprisingly, Mom said Jason had experience taking care of people, and she felt okay for the time being. I felt relieved, but then Mom suddenly had to go to the hospital in an ambulance because of a mistake with her medicine dosage. We all rushed to the hospital and found Mom very weak. I asked my wife to stay with her and went back to our family home. When I got there, the house was a mess. Mom couldn't even cook her favorite meals anymore. The fridge was empty, and it seemed like Emily had fired the helper without telling anyone. I regretted expecting anything from Emily and felt angry. When I checked Mom's safe, a lot of money had been taken out of her bank account. Thankfully, the money from the inheritance was safe somewhere else, but the money Mom used for everyday things was almost all gone. I quickly gathered important documents like bank books, cards, and seals, and went back to the hospital to explain everything to Mom and figure out what to do next. "Emily has," Mom struggled to say. It seemed she didn't know about the money being taken out of her account, and she was shocked when I mentioned the mistake with her medicine. Mom said Jason had prepared it, and her expression became weak and darker. "I think it's best if we don't let Emily back into the house," I told Mom. "Jason," Mom replied, looking confused. I explained my worries further. "I promised to take care of things, but the house is in such a mess, Mom. You've lost a lot of weight. You must not have been eating well." Seeing her reaction, I gently suggested, "Mom, let's live together. Let's build a new house and stay there together." Mom started crying heavily at my words, but soon after, her condition got worse, and despite the doctor's efforts, she passed away. Heartbroken over what Emily did, I went back to the family home to get ready for Mom's funeral. I found out that all the valuable things were gone. It turned out Emily and her husband, who were having money problems, took them. Seeing the empty house, I felt shocked and angry. "We have to fix this no matter what," I decided firmly. The day after Mom's funeral, I was supposed to meet Emily and the lawyer at the law office to talk about the inheritance. Emily, feeling superior, confidently said, "I have the right to Mom's inheritance, unfortunately for you." I couldn't help but laugh at her misunderstanding. She was making a big mistake. The lawyer opened the will, and as soon as we saw what was written, Emily's face turned pale with shock. "No, how could this happen?" Emily exclaimed. "The will clearly says you're not getting anything," the lawyer told Emily. Jason, furious, demanded, "What's that supposed to mean? She's her daughter. You can't fool us. Give us the inheritance now." He banged the table in anger. I calmly asked him, "Jason, did you do something to Mom?" "I didn't do anything," he replied dismissively. "Then why was her medication messed up?" I pressed. But Jason just brushed it off, saying, "That doesn't matter." "John, I can't believe I'm getting nothing from Mom's inheritance." "What did you do?" "I can't pay for my apartment right now," Emily said. Her words shocked me. I realized Emily had assumed she'd get something, even though she didn't show up right after Mom died. Emily, desperate, asked the lawyer, "Is there really nothing for me?" The lawyer sighed deeply and said, "Yes, the will is clear." Then the lawyer explained the legal stuff about the mandatory share. It turned out that after taking away the money Emily had taken out and sold without permission, there wasn't much left in the inheritance. Actually, this was part of a plan I had talked about with the lawyer before. Emily was shocked and protested loudly. There can't be so little. Mom and I had purposely not told Emily about this. In reality, most of Mom's stuff had been given to my daughters while she was alive, so there wasn't much left to inherit. But Emily didn't want to accept it and kept complaining. Like with Dad, I felt really angry with Emily, who only took from others without doing anything herself. It's so disrespectful to just take money when Mom thought you'd take care of her. Taking care of someone costs money, and you don't get that, I told her. Then show me what you spent on Mom. If it's really necessary, I'll pay for it, Emily said. When I said that, Emily got shaky and her face changed. There's no proof without receipts. We can't agree to those expenses, I told her. While Emily was silent, Jason attempted to use a gentle tone to sway things his way. John, think about it. Your sister really needs help right now. Wouldn't it be good to lend a hand? I'm sorry, but I can't agree to that, I said firmly. Jason was shocked by my direct refusal and stayed quiet for a bit. I didn't hold back my feelings and openly admitted, honestly, I've been treated badly by my sister for a long time. I almost feel satisfied now. But your siblings, right? Can't you try to work together a bit? If the plan we had made earlier had worked, Emily would have gotten all the inheritance, Jason said. What plan? I asked. Jason went on, it's Emily's fault things didn't work out. I was supposed to get a new car, but now I only have enough for repairs. Emily panicked and tried to stop him, but it was too late. That sounds like fraud, I said, seeing where it was going. What? That's against the law. We got permission to record this meeting beforehand, the lawyer explained. Jason went pale, realizing his mistake. I said firmly, I'll be taking legal action about what you just said. That's ridiculous. There's no proof, Jason protested. Proof? What you said is proof enough, I replied. Emily cried out in agony, shaking. Jason, you fool. What do we do now? This is all your fault. As a result, Jason faced legal consequences, and his past wrongdoings came to light, leading to his arrest. Although Emily seemed to be involved too, she struggled to pay her apartment rent. When she asked relatives for help, they all said no. Meanwhile, I kept working steadily, not letting the situation affect me, and looked forward to small joys like stock dividends.